The Hailsham News Podcast.
As we know, the global pandemic has put a firm stop on millions of holidays this summer, and understandably there's lots of worry and confusion from people who have booked them later this year. So what are your rights, and will these holidays actually happen? Well, I've got two travel experts on the line with me now who will explain what the outbreak has meant to them and their businesses and tell us how the global travel business has been affected. So firstly, if we can start off with some short introductions to let our listeners know who you are and what you do. So ladies first, Angie, welcome along. Would you like to tell us who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you. I'm Angie Watson. I'm a director of Experience Holidays based in Hailsham. We are a tour operator specialising in long-haul tailor-made holidays. The company's been in operation since the 1960s. I've been with the company sort of 10 and a half years and been a director now for 5 years. Have to say this has probably been the most challenging time in my career. And I'm sure a lot of other travel companies will be saying the same.
Absolutely. I think there's millions of other businesses that will be saying the same as well at this moment, isn't there? But
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you, Angie. And now my second guest is joining us from the other side of the world, straight from California. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul and Angie. So, yes, Jonathan Cowley, originally local boy from Eastbourne, but I moved out to Los Angeles in 2003. And I originally worked with British Airways. I used to be their regional sales manager and also their station manager at LAX. And then I worked for Air New Zealand for a couple of years, running their corporate team. And now I'm running a travel management company in West Hollywood, Corniche Travel. And we specialize in both corporate and leisure travel, which we call it over here in the US. And we also have our own division, something called Anastasia's Africa, where we specialize in African tailor-made safaris. And our company has been open for 33 years, based in the same office in West Hollywood for all those years.
Fantastic. That's great. So, I mean, the world has changed in the last couple of weeks significantly, hasn't it? So could I just ask you how, from your perspectives, how the last 3 weeks has changed your businesses? Shall we start with you, Angie?
Yeah, sure. So really the last few weeks, as I mentioned, have been incredibly challenging. It's such an unprecedented event. I don't think anyone could ever have predicted this happening. You know, the travel industry as a whole, we've always had challenges to deal with. You know, there's been obviously, you know, when terrorist attacks happen, the ash clouds, you know, natural disasters, those sort of things. But this is just on another scale, really. We've never had this kind of scale of situation. So it's just been a case of really working out how best to assist our customers and trying to sort of help those get home that were stuck abroad when all of this started, and then begin to look at those that were due to travel imminently when it all began, and therefore carrying onwards from there as well.
So I assume, although yourself, Jonathan, is the other side of the world, you felt the effects of this a couple of weeks before we did. Is that right?
Yes, well, especially as one of our sort of larger corporate clients is a university, and they have students based all over the globe. They have these international programs where they spend a year in a destination, and we had over 50 students that were based in Shanghai, China. So when the outbreak started, we went into kind of emergency mode and had to get the students back to the US as quickly as possible. What the biggest challenge for us was that it was the Chinese New Year, so the beginning of February, and a number of them weren't in China, because what often happens is the university closes and then they all go out and travel around Asia. So that became a bit of a challenge for us. And then on top of that, the US implemented pretty strict guidelines in relation to returning permanent residents. You had to return to a certain airport. So you couldn't just fly into any airport in the US. Los Angeles was one of them. We had Seattle, San Francisco, because what they did was they set up CDC, so that's the Center for Disease Control. They had entry points at these airports where they would then test people when they arrived. So they were very specific about which airports that people could fly into. But yes, we got involved very early on, and continuing to carry on right now. Where we have a number of leisure and corporate clients are still cancelling trips. People are not generally rebooking them right now; they're just simply cancelling, and we're having to manage, obviously, all these unused tickets. Which, with some customers, those unused tickets are totaling, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of unused tickets.
This is having a knock-on effect completely around the world, isn't it? It's not about people from UK or the US going somewhere. It's about what's actually happening in that country as well, isn't it? I saw something yesterday on the news that wildlife is being affected in parts of Africa because they can't get the workers there. They can't get the charities over to help these situations as well. So it's not about just people going on holiday. It's a greater issue here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just such a global issue, really. You've got wildlife trusts that will be reliant on workers coming to assist. You'll have all sorts of charities, I guess, worldwide that will be struggling as a result of this. There aren't many industries or many people that aren't affected, really, in some way or shape. It's just unprecedented. It's an overused word at the moment, but I think it's the best word for it. It's just so difficult to see how this is going to have an impact in the longer term, really. It's going to be ramifications for such a long time to come, I think.
Sure. And obviously, as you just said, it's the unknown, the unknown, isn't it? I mean, we don't know how long this is going to go on for and how we're going to start the recovery process. But maybe let's go ahead 3 months and assume that everything's going the right way. Jonathan, how do you think things will change? There's the airports are partially closed. There's no planes in the sky. How are we going to get back to normality after this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that one of the key things is that travel will never be the same again. I mean, I think we found after 9/11, travel changed dramatically. In the US, you used to be able to go to the gate to see somebody off. Well, come 9/11, that all came to a grinding halt, and you had to go through metal detectors and have your bags x-rayed. So we know that there's going to be some significant changes. And especially here in the US carriers are doing a pretty good job of marketing to their customers how they are cleaning their aeroplanes. They always have cleaned them, but now they're using foggers within the cabin. They're having to obviously wipe down all surfaces with disinfectant, etc. So I think the thing is that people always will demand now some sort of guarantee that they're getting on a plane that is clean. And it's also what's very interesting. I had a call yesterday where we were discussing with a number of other travel agencies, when is the recovery going to happen and what's it going to look like? Well, obviously, when is a very tough question right now. But with regard to where, it's felt that most countries, domestic tourism is going to be where it starts initially. And there is a strong belief that leisure travel or tourism will return first, and that corporate travel will be a little bit more cautious. But definitely, I mean, when it does come back, you're going to see some people may want to have the seat next to them vacant because they don't want to be sitting right next to somebody. But then the other wider question is how do you deem somebody fit to travel? And that's going to be part of the wider question, which I think is linked to testing and being able to ascertain if individuals, have either had COVID-19 or once they come out with an inoculation, that they've had that inoculation. So, yeah, it's going to look very different, Paul, when it comes back.
Yeah, some really interesting points there, actually, isn't there? Some sort of things we haven't really thought about. I mean, I'm thinking at the moment that when things do get back to, let's call normal again, that there's just going to be a backlog of people wanting to take their holidays that they're not doing now. But the problem is, we're seeing airlines almost disappearing. There's going to be less planes. There's going to be less movements. Angie, do you foresee a problem with people wanting to take their holidays when we're back to normal, but not being able to?
I do, yes. I think there'll be a lack of capacity, certainly initially when travel first begins to resume. I think airlines, hotels, all of the different suppliers will be rather cautious, and it's going to take a long time for them to resume their sort of normal schedules and have the normal capacity. So I think when it does start back, I think we'll see reduced capacity and therefore potentially higher prices. But I think what I can't decide in my mind is whether we're going to see a massive influx of people wanting to get away because they feel they've been sort of almost starved of their holidays and therefore wanting to get away even more so. Or on the flip side of that, there's going to be a lot of people that have suffered financial hardship during this situation and therefore may now not be in a position to go on holiday for longer than they would normally. So I think it's going to be interesting. What we're saying to our clients at the moment is, if you're thinking of travelling next year, a lot of the hotels, the ground agents are operating much more flexible booking policies. So in some ways, it may be better if there's a flexible enough policy in place. It may be better for people to think about booking a trip now with a view to it being amendable if need be, then wait until travel restarts and then potentially find you struggle for availability or the prices are higher.
Jonathan, you work really closely with the world's leading airlines, really. I mean, do you see problems in this area in a few months' time?
Well, certainly here in the US, we've seen such a dramatic drop in capacity. And I actually have one client who's kind of taken a leap of faith. They have an event at the end of July, and they actually reached out to us a month ago and said, we want to move ahead with booking it, which we've done. We've actually booked their flights as 170 people. With the understanding that if, travel still isn't back to normal at the end of July, which, I have my doubts it will be back to normal, they do have the ability to cancel the tickets at no cost, and then they will get a credit. And yesterday, both United Airlines and Delta, and we're sure American will follow, they have agreed to extend the validity of that credit for up to 24 months. So you have the ability to use that credit within the next couple of years, which again is, I'm going to use the word, Angie, unprecedented. But it truly is unprecedented. We've seen nothing like that. And then just another example is the cruise companies. I mean, the cruise companies have been devastated. There are still ships out there with people on board them because they cannot get people off quick enough. The US has agreed to take a number of cruise ships because obviously Miami, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, all of those ports have significant numbers of cruises each year. And so they've agreed to take ships. But obviously the challenge is getting people off the ship because they have to test everybody as they come off. And obviously the tests aren't immediate and they need to wait for results. But the cruise companies have done something very similar where they've said, book with confidence. If you book with us and decide to cancel within 48 hours, we will give you your money back. Or for people who've booked further out, they're saying, look, if you want to go ahead and cancel, we will give you a credit. And in many cases, I think it was Norwegian Cruise Lines were offering up to 140% value of your booked trip so that, when you do rebook, you've got a lot more money on the table. And also, we do feel, and we are seeing that there are a number of suppliers that are offering these very aggressive prices to try and get some money on the books. So I think initially there will be some aggressive pricing. But to Angie's point, I think the challenge will be once people start rebooking is that lack of capacity, which means that prices inevitably will have to go up.
interesting because the cruise ship industry has had quite a tough time, isn't it, over the last few years? And I think they've managed to overcome the issues they had a few years ago, but then are probably going to suffer again, aren't they? So,
well, I think, Paul, just because I'm a big cruiser myself, we go every year. We go on a cruise from Florida with Royal Caribbean, and we go on one of their larger ships, which has 6,000 people on board. We were on a number of occasions were delayed because the previous cruise, somebody had some sort of stomach flu. And as a result, they had to, sterilize the ship effectively. So boarding the ship was delayed. So it's not uncommon for, people to get sick on ships. But this is a whole nother level, and how the ships now will control this moving forward. I mean, they were initially, once the outbreak from China occurred, they weren't allowing anybody who traveled to China within the last, I think it was 2 weeks, to come on the ship. They're also checking people's temperatures. But, for the cruise lines, I think this is going to mean some major overhaul of their policies and who they allow to travel with them, to ensure that there's a level of comfort for their other clients, so that they know when they get on that ship that they're unlikely to get sick.
We've got a lot of questions from our readers on Hailsham News because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of holidays booked and a lot of concerned people out there. If we can go through them, I understand we probably won't have the actual answers, but obviously your expertise in both your fields would be appreciated. Firstly, Pauline Kelly, she said, do we need to pay for our holiday off in full, even though we're not sure if we can go? Any thoughts on that, Angie?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that would be yes, if your balance is due to the company you've booked with, I would still pay that balance, because if you don't, you're potentially in breach of your contract of the booking conditions. And in that eventuality, the company you've booked with may have the ability to cancel your holiday and withhold your deposit from you. So my answer would be proceed. It's a difficult situation. Nobody wants to be paying out extra money when they think there's a fair chance it will be cancelled. But if you don't, as I say, there is a chance that the company you've booked through will cancel the arrangements, but withhold your money. If you pay your balance and then closer to the time the trip is unable to go, then it's more than likely you'll either be offered a refund or a credit for a future trip. It's just a case of checking with the company you've booked through and checking what their policy is in this situation.
Right, really important advice there. Is it the same sort of situation in the US, Jonathan?
Yes, absolutely. With cruise companies, you are required to pay in full by the date that's agreed on your contract. As I say, there is obviously the added flexibility now that individuals are being given by companies. They're calling it book with confidence, most of them. So people should know that, if they pay up and then their trip subsequently is either cancelled or they do decide that they don't want to go, the cruise companies, the hotels, the airlines are being very, very flexible, and you won't lose the value of your holiday. So you can reschedule it for later in the year.
Right, I see. I mean, most of these questions are obviously from people worried about the money side of things, because, just because, we're in these times where, as you said, people don't really want to be spending money if they don't think their holiday will happen. But also Linda Dunn has written to us and says, we have a holiday booked to go to Tenerife in April. The website is suggesting we book another holiday later in the year. We are unable to go later this year and in fact do not want to go. Are we entitled to 100% refund instead? Angie?
It will definitely be worth speaking to their travel insurance company and also the company that they've booked the trip through. It will very much come down to the company's individual policy, but a lot of the time, as Jonathan had mentioned, companies are trying to be as flexible as they can. There's been a lot of talk within the travel industry as a whole at trying to really ensure that the industry is still here for when travel resumes. And with that in mind, most companies are requesting clients consider a credit note or a postponement as opposed to a refund. But it's definitely worth speaking to the individual company that they've booked with. Depending on how they've booked and what they've booked, it may well be that they would be entitled to a refund. But quite often those decisions would only be made when travel is deemed imminent, which could well be just a few days prior to travel.
Sure. Cheryl Parsons has also written in. She says, we've been told to keep paying our instalments. So we've kind of covered this, haven't we? It says, and let the travel company cancel the holiday and then we can get our money back. Is this true? So yes, you're saying that if you carry on with the instalments, if the travel company then cancel, you will get a refund. Is that correct?
As we understand it at the moment, with most travel companies, yes, either a refund or a credit voucher. It does depend exactly what they've booked, who they've booked it with. So always worth double checking with the company concerned, and also worth double checking with the travel insurance company as well, as that may be another avenue for a refund, just depending on what they've booked and how they've booked it.
Carol Callow has also said to us, holidays booked for the first 3 weeks in August to Florida. Can I transfer it to the same time next year? So they don't want a refund this time. They just want to do it another year. Is that the kind of thing travel companies would do?
I certainly believe so. There are a couple of slight logistical question marks in that a lot of the time airlines don't release their schedules and availability until 11 months prior to travel. So in essence, most companies would be comfortable to postpone the trip for a client, but they may not physically be able to amend the flights, for instance, until further down the line. And again, it will depend on the policies of the elements of that trip. So if the airlines have a policy that allows a postponement that far ahead, then the chances are that would work. And I certainly know we, and I'm sure most in the industry, are doing our best to assist clients with postponements. We would all far rather people postpone their travel than cancel it altogether. So I would be very surprised if any company out there would not assist. I think everyone has got a common aim in that they're trying to help people as best they can, and would do their utmost to help postpone a trip till next year.
Right. So I would imagine the same advice would go to Liz Wells Door. She says we have a holiday booked for the end of June with TUI and told to rebook for a later date. We would rather have our money back as not sure when we'll be able to travel. Are we within our rights? So again, it's probably a case of contacting the provider and just seeing what the terms are. Right.
Definitely. And I think you'll probably find that they won't make a decision this far ahead for travel at the end of June. Obviously, at the moment, we really don't know how long this crisis is going to continue. But it's a very fair chance that at this point, if a client were to cancel, the chances are they may be bound by standard cancellation rules, unless, of course, they may have the option of a credit voucher. But if they're wanting an actual refund, it's more likely that they'd have to wait until the travel date was imminent before a company might consider that option for them.
Right. And there's a wider issue here as well regarding passports. I'm not sure if you're having the same issue in the US, Jonathan, but the passports are, almost not being issued at the moment, and there are very long delays. And Sarah Jane Leyland has said we have a holiday booked for June and we all need our passports updating, but the passport office isn't issuing new ones at the moment. If we are not able to get passports before our holiday day, but restrictions are lifted and we can't go, would we be entitled to a refund or rebooking as we don't have a passport? Tricky one, that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that, certainly a good example here is we have a new law being brought in here in the US, which is called the Real ID Act. So effective October this year, individuals who want to travel on an aircraft have to either present a passport or they have to present what is called a Real ID. So it's basically a driving license, but it's federally approved, meaning that the federal government has certain security measures built into it, which means it's acceptable for travel. You can still get a regular driving license, but you have to have this Real ID to travel. And they've now extended the deadline by a year. Now, with regard to passports, that's a whole nother kettle of fish, because the US and most countries do require a minimum of 6 months validity on your passport in order to travel to a given country. So you may well find that's something that really you can't get around, because it would be very difficult for the UK to extend the validity of these passports. I mean, maybe there is a way to do it electronically, but I personally think it's going to be something that's going to be hard to get around. If a passport's not valid, it's not valid. And as I say, especially the 6-month rule to most countries around the globe, there is that requirement to have at least 6 months left in your passport. And another example, certain countries, South Africa is one of them, requires you to have 2 clean pages opposite each other in your passport. And if you don't have those, they actually will turn you around and send you home. So in answer to that question, Paul, personally, I can't see a way around it unless something new is brought out. And it's not because of the US passport office, it's because of the entry requirements for other countries.
So, Angie, have you had any word of anything changing in this area to allow these people to get their new passports?
In all honesty, no, I haven't. I mean, I'm actually going to be in the same situation in that my daughter, who's 10 months old, doesn't yet have a passport. We're due to do a little trip ourselves at the end of June. Obviously, no idea yet whether that's going to go ahead, but equally, if it can go ahead, we're not sure that we're going to be able to get her passport sorted in time. So I'm in exactly the same boat as a lot of people will be. I honestly don't know what the answer is going to be. I don't know at the moment if that's high up on the government's agenda. I'm assuming it will become higher at some point, because, of course, there will be a lot of people affected by that. But the answer, in all honesty, may well be that if you can't get a passport in time but your trip is going, you may lose the money. I don't know that it would be an insurable situation. So unless the government does do something to extend validity somehow, or when they reopen passport applications, whether they somehow sort of get extra staff in to manage the backlog they'll have. I'm not too sure the answer to that.
Really, then I suppose it's keep pressurising the passport office on that one. So sorry, yeah. Sarah Jane Leyland, that's the answer for the moment, is keep pressurising that passport office, and we really hope that you get what you need and get to your holiday. Listen, everyone, it's been a fantastic podcast and some really good advice. If people want to come and talk to you about future holidays, Angie, how do they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. Well, certainly at the moment, we're working from home rather than in our office in Hailsham. So the best way is either to give us a call or send us an email. When we are back in the office, we're located in the Cortland building in Hailsham. So always more than happy to see customers come into the office, ideally by appointment, just purely so that we can make sure that a customer sees the person that best knows the destination that they're considering going to, because we all sort of have our specialism areas that we know better. So that's really the best option. But at the moment, telephone or email or on Facebook. Okay,
so give us your website and your email address and...
Thank you. So Our email address is info@experienceholidays.co.uk. Our telephone number is 01323 446 550. And our website is www.experienceholidays.co.uk.
Brilliant. And Jonathan, you up for a company plug or...
Well, I'm actually, we'd love to help our British cousins over there, but no, obviously most of our business is US based. But one thing I would like to plug is the industry as a whole. So, Angie and myself work in a business that we're there to support clients. We have the knowledge, the experience of all these holidays, flights, cruises, etc. And over the last few weeks, it's been very heartwarming to get some wonderful feedback from customers, because as people can probably appreciate, with the airlines, hotels, cruise companies being impacted, a lot of them have had issues like call centers closing because somebody in their office has had COVID-19. And so we've had some customers who've come to me, said they've been waiting up to 5 hours on the phone to talk to an airline just to cancel their ticket. So obviously travel agencies like ourselves, we're there for you 24/7 and are easily contactable. And we're there to support the airlines. We're not trying to say that the airlines are doing a poor job, because they're not. They're under extreme pressure in extreme circumstances, but we're there to support them. And I've even had friends of mine, funny enough, in the UK, who'd booked on Expedia and said, "Can you help me?" Well, if you didn't book with us, I can't get directly involved. But what I did do, I reached out to our American Airlines representative and got her to cancel their booking. And obviously that now they have a credit. But, as individuals in the travel management business, we have those relationships with suppliers. So, we're there to help you. We're there to support you. And especially, in these unprecedented times, one more time, Angie, one more time, in these unprecedented times, we can help, and we can help you when you can't get through to the suppliers. So give us a call, but not us, because we're in America. So
Brilliant. Well, one thing for sure is we've certainly said unprecedented amount of times in the same interview. So that's one thing we've got right. Listen,
yes.
Fingers crossed that we all get through this together and it's over as quickly as it started, and we can all get back to some sort of normality. Well done for the work you're doing, and all the best. And regards to everyone in California and from Helsham. And thanks for joining us.